Right now, we're going through a pandemic, which is something that the human race has experienced before. We've got the Spanish flu, we've got the plague. There are many instances of this pattern repeating itself. What can we do when we see patterns like this on the global scale? Is there anything that we as individuals can do, or do we just sort of watch it unfold?
Yeah, we can do something. I think that, like, your summit and many other activities and groups that are interesting in deepening our awareness of the living process. And when I see a pattern, I see a symptom. And it's so easy to get entangled in that symptom and to even talk too much about the symptom. Not We have to be very careful. We don't want to support fascism, and we don't want to support like certain patterns in the world. We need to be discerning, clear, maybe even protect people that are still, like in the US, the structural violence against African American people cannot continue, and every one of us needs to do our best to stop the ongoing traumatization, let alone the support like 400 years of traumatization that needs to be healed. So there is something that we need to step in. We have a responsibility as citizens to do our best, not to save the country. If everybody does his or her best, we will do a lot. And so that's one thing. But then we hear often the dialogue about the symptom keeps us entangled on the level of the symptom. So at the same time, we also need to develop a way to recognize those patterns and see, wow, the pandemic brings a lot of stress into the societal process, and the fractures that are anyway already there will be highlighted through the stress. If a traumatized person gets more stressed, the trauma symptoms will get stronger or will be more obvious. So when a traumatized society gets more stressed, the underlying fragmentations will appear more on the surface of the society. And I think that's also what we have seen also now in the US. It highlights the fragmentations, but if we can use that moment to address those, not the symptoms, like the symptoms need to be looked at and discerned, of course, but then we need to also go to the deeper layer and say, what is actually frozen here? How has the Civil War been integrated? How did we integrate the traumatization and the ancestral traumatization of African Americans and white people and Native Americans in the society? Because those are the underlying canyons that are invisible usually, not structurally, but the essence of it is invisible. The symptoms are very obvious. And I think we need to learn to develop a different way to look at the societal process on a deeper level, as well as we take care of the social issues that we see. But that alone will keep the pattern returning. So we are trying to deal with the pattern, then it looks like it subsides a bit. That's why I often say, as long as we didn't go to the root of the Holocaust, it's bound to repeat itself somewhere in the world, because we didn't get yet the learning, the post-traumatic learning that reveals the pearl, the systemic learning after the Holocaust. And we are not there yet. So the fact that we have right now concentration camps on the planet, or camps where people are detained and tortured, is a repetition of something that was there before, maybe in a different form and not as concentrated, but it's still repeating itself. And the world knows about it, and it's still happening. So I believe that the fact that we are so overinformed at the moment through technology, like my cell phone can, send me push notifications 5 minutes after somewhere something exploded. I can read about it, but it doesn't mean that I'm really informed. Actually, it's sometimes the opposite, that over information will make us actually feel more numb. If we don't know how to process the current information stream well, we will detach ourselves and become more and more overwhelmed and more indifferent. And that's the basis for another catastrophe. And one of them is already coming closer, it's climate change. And that catastrophe is also, I believe, based on the collective trauma numbness of humanity that doesn't feel the natural feedback mechanism, the adaptation and the evolutionary adaptability. And so I think that that's why it's becoming more pressure, like it's becoming more imminent, the crisis, and then it will lead to follow-up traumatizations through millions of climate refugees, and people get deep, it's already happening, deeply hurt through the fires and the hurricanes and the floods and so I think we are in a time where, without integrating the collective traumatization, just more trauma layers come on top of it. And I often, maybe the last thing I often say that, when snowflakes fall into water, they become water. But when snowflakes fall onto iced over rivers, they pile up. So there's more and more snow on the ice. So when experience meets us in the open, vulnerable, related part, it becomes part of a flow. But when follow up experience meets us where we are traumatized, we cannot process the experience, and it becomes another layer of information on top of the trauma, and on top of the trauma, and on top of the trauma. So that means that the saying, okay, the time will heal the wounds, is not really true, because there is an accumulative effect of trauma. It's not that it's just gonna go away the longer we wait. And that's why there is a calling, and I think you with your summit and or the Shift Network, and you with the summit, and many groups, as we are working together on not waiting for it to disappear, but actively turning towards the past that we need to integrate in order to open up a brighter future.
Oh my goodness. I love that you brought up. You're so close to out of time, but I want to make this point
It's
and
okay,
ask you about
I'm
this.
fine.
You mentioned that we have too much information and that it's so easy to become numb. And as you were talking, I was reminded of the fact that everything's become a big reality show. We even had a reality TV star as our president, and I think people, because of so much information, they almost feel like real life is just a reality TV show where you just have to tune in next week and somehow the writers will have come up with some way to solve that cliffhanger, when in reality this isn't a reality TV show. There really are consequences, and as you were saying, we really need to tune into our humanity and start feeling each other again. I think that was a really, the too much information was a beautiful point. Thank you for making that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think especially now that the information speeds up through technology, like a real practice how through presence and relatedness and regulation, we for ourselves, we for our children, that we find good ways, because there wasn't a generation before that had the same issue. So we are laying ley lines or tracks into the future, how we deal with high tech, how we deal with massive amount of information just speeding up every day, circulating around the planet, and the trauma information that runs through our news at the capital, and then there's something in China, and then there's something in Australia, and then there's something in Buenos Aires, and then there's something in Africa. There's a lot of trauma information circulating, and I think if we are traumatized and we hear a lot about it, then my mind hears it. My mind might be very informed about what's going on the planet, but my emotions and my body can't keep up with it. So I'm actually, when I really check in, just somebody shooting around in a school. I think when we hear about it, I believe that most of us can't feel what that means. That we maybe understand what it means, maybe we are emotionally touched, but we still don't feel what the event really meant for all the people that were involved, the pain that has been created in the families, the wider societal pain that the repercussions of such an event. So we are actually not contemporary witnesses or not holistic contemporary witnesses. And that's a question that if humanity produces and uses more information, then we can actually sustainably process what that means about how we live and what it means about what that information will turn into. And so I think there is a responsibility, but I'm happy that you picked it up, like because I think it's a real question, and also for people who are living more consciously, how we deal with information and also which information I expose myself, because a lot of information is being exposed that is actually not for us, that is violating the privacy of the people that are involved, that it's kind of a voyeurism. It's kind of dealing with a lot of sensational energy in the society. And I think we really have a responsibility to create a deeper discernment, to be informed, but also be informed in a way that we can digest. Otherwise, we'll create more and more side effects in our lives. And I have one more thing that I want to say. Given it's also like an ancestral trauma summit, that there's a beautiful saying in the Jewish mysticism is like in the time of the revelation, the fathers will turn to the sons and the sons will turn to the fathers, or the parents, the mothers to their daughters and the daughters to their mothers, like that when the ancestors can turn to each other and see each other. I often say presence is seeing, is clarity. So when I'm present, I see what's happening and I'm also clear. When I not being present, always something is hidden and it creates an unclarity. So when the flow of energy between the parents and the next generation, the grandparents and the parents and the next generation, when we cannot see each other because too much past is between us, so that we can look at each other because we can see each other when there's trauma, then the flow of energy through the generations is hurt, fragmented, and broken. And when we look at our bodies, the structures of our bodies, I often say there is such a collective belief that my body is 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. And I would say your body is hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years old. Because the cells sticking together, creating organs and emotional systems and thoughts, most of the people talked about what we are talking about already in the past. Like, not most of it, but some people talked about most of the things that we are talking about already. So it's not that we are so genius and all the things that we are bringing nobody thought about before. So, and I didn't invent anger and I didn't invent cells sticking together. So that's not, I'm resting in the achievements of all the ancestors. So the ancestors are actually structures of consciousness that make this conversation possible. And if all the ancestral wounding where we cannot see and be in the same moment, presence is the same moment. So we will feel separate from our ancestors and they will feel at a distance. And that affects our bodies. So the flow of information in our body is inherently interwoven with the flow of the energy through the ancestors. That's why I think it's such an important work also to understand ancestral trauma deeper, because it tells us a lot about individual and collective health. I just wanted to bring that in because of your summit, that we also speak a bit about the ancestral dimension and why it's so important.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I have kept you far longer than I'm supposed to. This conversation is just so fascinating. I want to make sure that we mention your website. It's thomashuebl.com, and that's where people can find your books, everything they want to know about you. You've got a YouTube channel. Um, gosh, once again, Thomas, I just want to thank you for spending some time with us and for sharing years worth of experience and knowledge. Thank you
Hmm.
so much.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me. It was a pleasure, the conversation. Thank you.